The man behind the rental office counter thanked me for June, and my wife had never been to that cottage in June. That is the sentence that ended my marriage, and he said it smiling, making small talk, while he ran our card for the balance. Every summer for years, my wife and her sisters have taken the same cottage near the beach for a week, and every summer she books it. And this year, she asked me to swing down and pay the balance in person. Nobody tipped me off. I was not digging. She handed me the errand herself and a list for the hardware store, since I was already making the drive. We had been married 13 years, no kids, a house paid down to almost nothing. I do maintenance at a poultry plant, been there since before I met her. My wife runs the front of a furniture store. She manages the schedule and the billing. The drive down is about an hour, and the rental office is a little storefront with pictures of every cottage on a corkboard. I gave the man our name, and he pulled the folder, and I paid the balance for her sister's week, about $800, and signed. And while the card ran, he said, "Good to have you folks back." That was a quick turnaround from June. I said, "June?" He said, "Sure, the June week." And he turned the folder around, and there it was in the ledger. The same cottage, 5 nights in June, my wife's name, our card, checked in, checked out. And the guest line said 2, and the sister's week always says 6. In June, my wife was at the spring furniture market 2 states away, 5 days, because I dropped her at the train myself and picked her up with flowers. I stood there, and the man watched my face change, and his smile went away, and neither one of us said a word about it. I signed the paper, told him thank you, and walked out. I sat on a bench outside and called the store, and the girl who answered told me my wife was out on the floor with a customer. Did I want to leave a message? I said, "No thank you," and hung up. Then I did the hardware store list, and I drove home. For 5 days she had texted me about boring vendors and bad coffee from a cottage porch an hour from my house. She got home at 6 that night and asked if the office gave me any trouble, and I said, "No trouble, paid in full." And she said, "Thank you, baby," and started on about her sister wanting the good bedroom this year. I asked her questions about her sisters the whole dinner because I did not trust my mouth with anything else, and she answered everyone without a blink. We met at her cousin's wedding 15 years ago, 2 tables of strangers pushed together when the hall flooded a corner, and she laughed at how I held the plate, and that was that. We tried for kids for a few years. It did not happen for us, and we made our peace with it, and I thought we had a good life. Her family is a big, loud one, 3 sisters, and when my wife took over the booking of their week, she took it over with a folder and a deposit schedule. It was her mother's week at the beach, and she parked her boyfriend in it. The next morning, I called the plant and took a personal day, my first one in 4 years, and I went to see a lawyer. She was younger than I expected, and she listened to the whole thing. Then she said, "Before we talk about what you want, let me tell you how Delaware works." She said, "This is a no-fault state, and if we file on incompatibility, the court makes you live separate for 6 months before anybody signs anything. But," she said, "there is another way. If the separation is caused by the other side's misconduct, and adultery is misconduct, spelled out in the statute, there is no wait, we can file and go. But misconduct has to be proven," she said, "and a ledger line with her name on it proves a rental, not an affair." Then she said, "Does your wife know that you know?" And I said, "No." And she smiled for the first time and said, "Good, keep it that way." Her rules were simple. Act normal, keep paying the bills, touch no money, tell nobody, and do not sleep with her, because in this state, forgiving it after you know about it can kill a misconduct filing. I asked her, "How long?" And she told me, "As long as it takes to prove it." And she said that alimony is the other thing everybody walks in scared about. In Delaware, alimony only goes to a dependent spouse, a person who cannot meet their own reasonable needs, and your wife manages a furniture store and out-earned you the year before last. She is not dependent on anybody, the lawyer said, and if her side even says the word alimony, we will hand the judge her pay stubs, and even when it is awarded, she said, it is capped, half the length of the marriage. This is not a state where you write checks forever. I asked her what it would cost me, and she said, the house gets split fair. The property law does not care who cheated, but wasting marital money on an affair is a factor, and every dollar of that cottage came out of your joint account. So I drove home to prove it, keep my mouth shut, and find out who owned that cottage. Proving it started with our card statements, the same way I pay the bills every month, except this time I went backward. The June week was all over the statements. The cottage deposit had gone through in April, labeled with the rental company's name, and I had paid that bill myself and never thought twice because she books that cottage every year. Then the June week itself, gassed twice at the beach town, a wine shop, a crab house 2 nights running, $68 the first night. My wife does not drink wine at a furniture market, and under all of it, the market was real. That is what took me a day to untangle. The store really sent her to buy for the floor, and the badge records my lawyer pulled later showed she picked up her badge the first morning and never scanned into another thing. She built her lie on top of a true thing. I photographed every page and put the folder in my toolbox at the plant where she would never look, between the torque wrench and the fuse kits. She came close to catching me once. Her phone was charging in the other room, and she grabbed mine at dinner to show me something her sister posted, and my photos were one swipe from every page of those statements. I had moved them that morning into a folder behind the work stuff, receipts, gaskets, part numbers. She found what she wanted, she laughed at it, and she put the phone down. That one scared the hell out of me. 2 days after I paid that balance, it nearly all came apart on its own. The rental office called her about the balance being settled, and whoever called must have mentioned I paid it in person, because she came home that night wound up in a way she was working hard to hide, and over dinner she asked, "So when you were down there, did they say anything about the booking?" I looked at her and said, "Like what?" And she said, "Oh, they double book sometimes. I just want the girls to have the good week." I said, "No, he ran the card. I signed. That was it." And I watched the relief hit her face, and she said, "Good," and changed the subject to her sister's dog. From that night on, she was lighter than she had been in months, sweeter to me too, and I cooked and mowed and drove to the plant and came home, and every day of it I knew, and she did not know I knew. That part was hard as hell. I slept next to her while I built a case against her for 19 days. There was one man who could blow it all up by accident, and that was the manager at the rental office. He had seen my face when he turned that folder around, and he had my wife's number in his booking system, and one friendly word on one confirmation call would burn everything my lawyer was building. So, on the second Saturday, I drove back down and stood at his counter, and there was no line, and I said, "I think you know why I am here." The man looked at me, and then he took the photo of that cottage down off the corkboard, and he said, 31 years I have run this office, and I have never once called a guest about anything but a balance, and I am not starting this summer." Then he put his hand out, and I shook it. He said, "My folks had a week here too, once upon a time, so I know what those weeks are worth, and I am sorry about yours." I drove home, and besides my lawyer, he was the only one who knew before she did, and he never said a word to anybody. Through all of it, I kept going to the plant 4 in the morning. The week before the hearing, The main conveyor seized on a Friday, and I had it moving again in 40 minutes, and my foreman clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Whatever you are going through, it is making you fast," and he was joking. I told him the whole story 2 months later, and he said, "My brother went through it. Took him 3 years to file. You did it in 3 weeks," and he shook my hand. The owner took 10 minutes to find because the rental office prints the owner's company right on the receipt, and the receipt was still folded in my wallet. A little company, and when my lawyer pulled the county property records behind it, the cottages came back to a man and his wife, joint owners, a married couple that owns 4 rentals along that beach. I had met the man 3 summers ago during the family's week. The cottage gutters let go in a storm, and the owner came out himself the next morning with a ladder on his truck, and I held that ladder for him. And when he came down, I handed the man a cold beer off our porch. My wife brought him a plate of the crab boil that night for the favor. My wife stood in the yard talking to him while I packed the cars because she said she wanted to square up about the deposit. The deposit was already squared. I know that now because I pulled the records, and there was nothing owed on that booking. And that told us who the man probably was, but the court needs proof. So the lawyer hired an investigator, licensed in the state, $3,800, and pointed him at the next booking. The joint card had a deposit on it from 3 weeks back. Same rental office, same cottage, 2 nights coming up, and my wife had already told me about it herself. A girls' weekend, she called it. Her and 2 of the girls from the store. A thank you the owner was half paying for after the busy season. She stood in my bathroom doorway and told me the dates and said, "It is mostly work, baby, not fun." She was counting down to that weekend, and she was not hiding it. She packed the night before, and the bag was wrong for a work trip. 2 sundresses, the good sandals, the perfume from the top shelf she saves, no laptop, a work weekend for a furniture store, and the office manager leaves the laptop on the desk. Friday at noon, she loaded her car, and I carried the cooler out for her. Then she pulled out of the driveway, and I went inside and called the investigator and said, "She is on her way." I stayed home and reframed the shed door, and I checked my phone about every 4 minutes. The door came out crooked, and I left it crooked. Saturday night, the investigator texted, "You will have everything Monday." Monday, he met me and my lawyer at a diner and laid it out. My wife arrived Friday at 4, right at check-in, alone. The man arrived Friday at 6 in a work truck, and he did not knock. He used his key. The report called him, the gentleman with access. No girls from the store, no work weekend, nobody else at all. 2 nights, 1 cottage, and the 2 of them on the back deck with wine in the morning. He had photos of all of it, time-stamped, sworn, admissible, and he had the man's wife, not in a photo, in the parking lot of the rental office Saturday afternoon, asking the manager questions. So, while my investigator was photographing my wife, the other wife was already pulling the same thread from her end. My lawyer filed that week, misconduct, the affair named, the cottage weeks listed with dates, the investigator's report behind it, and a request that the affair spending come off my wife's side of the split. And because it was a misconduct filing, there was no 6-month clock. She had another trip booked, not the cottage this time. A hotel weekend she had told me was for a design showcase, and my lawyer asked me where I wanted her served. I said, at the house on a weekday evening, no audience. The morning of it, she texted me from the store asking what I wanted for dinner, and I typed back, "Anything is fine." The process server rang my doorbell at 7 while we were both home and asked for her by name and handed her the envelope in the front hallway with me standing right there. She looked at the papers and then at me, and she said, "You knew?" The sorry never came. She got to the word misconduct on the first page, and her hand started going, and she said, This says adultery. And I said, it does. And she said, nobody can prove a thing that did not happen. So I told her about the man at the rental office says hello and thanks for June. She did not say anything after that. She sat down on the stairs with the envelope and did not say another word, and I went and slept in the spare room. She moved out that weekend. The night she moved out, one text came in near midnight from her oldest sister, and all it said was, "Is it true about the cottage?" And I wrote back every word, and the phone stayed dark after that. She took the rest of her things on a Saturday while I was at the plant. Her middle sister drove her. We set it up through the lawyers. When I got home, her closet was empty. The hotel weekend died on its own. 2 days after she was served, the refund landed back on the joint card, the whole deposit. The lawyers sat us down once to try and settle the property, and her side came in acting like the cottage money was nothing. Her lawyer called the June week a family expense, and my lawyer put the ledger page in front of him and asked him to say the guest count out loud. The family week say 6. That week said 2. Then her side tried calling some of those week's gifts from the owner, and my lawyer asked, gifts of what? His wife's cottage? Her side let it go. We settled everything else in that room, the house, the cars, the accounts. The cottage money and the alimony went to the judge. Her lawyer took a swing before the hearing, a letter offering to settle everything before a judge saw it if we withdrew the misconduct ground and filed it plain, and my lawyer asked me if I wanted to think about it. I said, no deal, and we went to the hearing. My lawyer had me ready to testify, the train drop-off, the flowers, the hardware list, and her side never called me up because the photos did the talking. The hearing came fast, and her lawyer did exactly what my lawyer said he would. Her lawyer told the judge she was stepping back to part-time at the store for her health and that her expenses were about to outrun her income, and my lawyer did not even stand all the way up. She said, Your Honor, that notice went in 9 days after she was served, and she passed the letter up, and the judge looked at it and looked at her and wrote something down, and her lawyer did not say part-time again. Her lawyer asked for alimony. My lawyer handed the judge 3 years of pay stubs from the furniture store, hers next to mine, and said, Your Honor, this is not a dependent spouse. And the judge went down the statute, needs, property, earning power, and denied her alimony claim. Her lawyer put his pen down, and she did not move. The cottage money came off her share. The June week, the girls' weekend, and every covered week, the ledger showed going back 3 summers, a little over $6,000. The house sold in 5 weeks, and we split what was left after the loan, half and half, and that was fair. The decree itself took about 20 minutes. On the courthouse steps, she stopped in front of me and said, For what it is worth, the sisters will not speak to me. And I said, That is between you and your sisters. And I went to work the back half of my shift. The foreman did not ask me anything that afternoon. Her sisters found out the girls' cottage was the place she took him, and that some of her girls' weekends over the years had a man in them, and her oldest sister took that the hardest, because she had covered for one of those weekends without knowing it, told me a story once about a sunburn and a card game that never happened. She mailed me a card that Christmas, the oldest sister, and she has every year since. She called me the night she worked it out and apologized for half an hour, and I told her the truth, that I never blamed the sisters for a single day of it, and that woman cried harder than my wife ever did in front of me. My wife tried the explaining once at the storage unit, both of us moving boxes on a Saturday because the house had sold. She stood there between the boxes and said, It was not about you. It started the summer the store was falling apart. He fixed the gutters while we were down there, and he just listened to me, and it felt like being seen. I put the last box on the stack and I said, the man saw a bored wife with a joint credit card, and I closed the unit and drove home. The man came to me once, before any of it was final. He was waiting by the fence at the plant lot at shift change, and he said my name like a question, and I knew him from the ladder and the beer, and I stood there and let him talk. He said he never meant for it to reach into my life like this, and that the cottage thing had gotten away from both of them, and that he was losing everything, the company, the houses. And did I really need the misconduct in the papers because it was killing him twice? Then I told him, you used your key on a door my money paid to rent, and the papers stay exactly as they are. And I got in my car and drove home. He never contacted me again. The man's wife took him apart. She owned half already, 4 rentals, the trucks, the company, and her lawyer was better than his. The manager down there told me later that both lawyers came for his ledger inside the same month, mine first, then hers. He gave them the same folder he turned around for me. Their settlement took longer than mine, and when it was done, she kept the company and she kept the cottages, all 4, and he kept his truck and his tools and a rented room over a bait shop. I know that because she called me once, near the end of it, to ask if my investigator's report could be shared with her lawyer, and I said, ma'am, with pleasure. She thanked me, and then she didn't say anything for a second, and she said, you know they used my grandmother's cottage, and I said, I am sorry, and she said, no, we are the 2 who get to be sorry for them. Her lawyer bought the report from my investigator too, and the same photographs ended both marriages. My wife and the man lasted about 6 weeks past the second divorce. I heard it from my wife herself because she called me on a night in the winter after everything was signed and asked me if I ever thought about how it used to be. I told her the balance was paid in full and I hung up. This summer, her sisters took their week at a different beach. My wife was not invited. They sent me a picture from the new beach, the 3 of them with their drinks up. Her oldest sister stopped me at the gas station a while back, put her hand on my arm and said, the girls always liked you better anyway, and the cottage, the one from the corkboard, is still for rent every summer. The listing has one owner's name on it now, and it is hers, the AP's ex-wife.